Okay. I didn't, I ended up making a Christmas tree. I hate doing round things because I can't keep every line the same way. And then I had to jazz it up a little. Ah, yeah, there we go. But that was a lot of great information. And this is the first Christmas tree that everything seemed to be in proportion for a change.
All right, so I did beads only on the 2x4 spindle, and I brought in my first one and my last one, and I did not get 12 done before responsibility took over, and I had to evacuate. But there are a lot of catches on number one, and I'll just say there are fewer catches on the last one.
Well, I got through a few sticks. This is all I've been working on for the last couple of weeks is when I got some time coming in and doing those. This is where I started. It was one of the bat blanks. And as you can see, I had several catches. I, at that time, thought that the toe of the skew was what you were to use to make the beads. And I'm like, this isn't working very good. And then I talked to Sue, and Sue's going, well, I think it was the heel. And then she came back to me the next time we were in shop, and she said, yeah, it was definitely the heel. And when I went back to the heel, they started to happen pretty good then, and then went into the beads with the coves. And I don't think there's any of these sticks that didn't have some kind of skate going on at one point or other. But by the last one, I was a lot more confident in doing it. So it is one of those muscle memories and practice makes perfect kind of thing. So I think before I'd take it to any project, I'd have a side piece over there to practice about 3 or 4 times before I ever went to my final. But I've been turning for probably 12 years now, and it's the first time I felt good about anything I've done with the skew other than the scraping. So enjoyed learning that.
Hello. Okay, starting out, I didn't have a skew, and I was counting on using one from the club's cupboard to get my exercises done, and I discovered there wasn't a skew in the club's cupboard. And so I bought one of Don Grimes' tools that could be turned into a skew. And so my first one didn't get very far because I spent almost all the time grinding the skew. And then the second one got better, but had some spots where I didn't quite get things under control. And then the third one, I declared victory.
Well, I didn't have I didn't want to, I wanted to turn things I could sell. And so here we go. I turned Harry Potter bead and cove wand. And it mostly, no, it doesn't do anything. What? No, I haven't. And so I only did 5, and I didn't use fillets. That's all. You sanded. What? Did you sand it? I did. Is that what's bad?
Okay, I started out making the practice beads and coves, and I would make a bead and it would look pretty good, and then zip. And so I'd make a smaller bead and then zip. And so I got to my third one. I thought, well, I got to do something else with a skew. So I turned a couple of eggs with a skew. And then I thought, Mel Bryan introduced me to these, and these are flowers that were made with the skew. So I made some flowers. The one though, I used a bowl gouge on it, and it came out a little different, but all these other ones were made with a skew.
Challenges pretty good here. We got another threaded insert as well as a nice little chunk of lace wood that I found on the back. So that's our prize tonight, Don. Oh.
Nobody played that challenge.
Our winner for the challenge is number 418. 418. It might be. 418. This is really rigged, guys. I don't know. All right. So Don, we got to have a different challenge than that, because not everybody's married and not everybody's a man, so they don't all have wives, or, well, I guess that doesn't necessarily matter anymore, but so next month's challenge.
Let's do this. You turn something and use an alternative drying method to dry.
Okay.
Speed it up, whatever that is.
Turn some green wood. Try to find a method that you can speed up the drying process other than just air drying with chips. So and then be prepared to explain what you did and what you thought the results were from that. So that's our challenge for next month, and we'll get right on into our challenge, or our show and tell table. So if you brought something up for show and tell, please come show and tell.
You can't say that I've got kind of a theme going on for tonight. Making candy dishes, and decided to decorate them with some Hobby Lobby Christmas trees. Yeah.
So which one's active? Okay, this is a piece of birch. It had cracks in it because it was still pretty thick and hadn't had time to dry. So I filled those in with epoxy. And on the inside, it's got 3 coats of epoxy to glue it all together. And I put a little bit of iron oxide to give it some color and whatnot. Used water locks on the outside for a finish. The platter, I had some leftover Baltic birch, so I cut it into strips and glued them together alternatingly, so it's up and sideways, up and sideways. Glued each one with epoxy, and then I colored the epoxy, so I couldn't glue it all together at one time. So it was a slow process, but I just used it to make a platter. And then the corners I used for a foot on this, glued it together that way. And I used water locks for that.
Well, we'll continue with epoxy, but I use a urethane epoxy. Black walnut, it's twice turned, it's air dried. So I don't know how long it's been air dried, probably 4 years. And then there was a big knot. In fact, if you look on the inside, there's the knot right there. So big knot there, and so I've done several of these where you just cut the channel. It's 1/8 of an inch deep, and I had brought home from Oregon a bunch of sequoia redwood pine cones from my brother-in-law's house, and so that's what I used here. These are the sequoia pine cones. Normally they say you should stabilize the pine cones. I've never used stabilizing in any of my turnings, but I've got 4 different colors of epoxy, and this one I basically did seal the groove that I'd cut both on the upper part, the lower part, and the back part, and then used the 5-minute epoxy and stuck on the pine cones after I had sanded them on the disc sander. So basically, just imagine it was a small pine cone, and you use the disc sander, and you're sanding it, and you got to be very careful with your fingers. And then you flip it around, and you're just holding it there, and you're trying to get it about a little bit thicker than the groove that you've cut, so that it protrudes out just a little bit. And then you have to build a plastic frame around this, and it's held together by a hose clamp. And I blue tape both this edge and this edge to keep the epoxy from entering into this wood. I just don't want a darker blob of epoxy. And it worked. It worked really well. And then the finish is just Parfix, just 1 coat of Parfix. And I kind of like the finish, especially on the inside. It looks just more natural. It's not a real shiny epoxy look that a lot of people like, but this is what I like.
This is black gum. I got it from Jerry Darter. He said it had been laying around for 2 or 3 years. It's spalted fairly well. The center part of the log was still fairly hard, and it has deteriorated quite a bit on the outside. I guess you can see it here. I don't know if you can tell it. There's some holes under the bark and before the wood, and they go all the way through. And so what happens was the bark came off of the top end of one of them and not the other. And so what I did was took all the rest of the bark off, and I sanded it some, which took away some of the roughness and also made certain all the bark was gone. And then I burned it with a torch, and you burn it when it's still not your final grit. So like at 150 grit, I burned the edges, and then I sanded it, and then sanded the 220, and that way you get a nice crisp edge. It looks okay, but it'll look better if you add a real white sapwood. So you have walnut or cherry, and then outside of that you have the white sapwood, and then out of that you have the burned layer, and it makes a real nice contrast.
Well, I've told this story before. Other mic. Oh, okay.
Well, hearing aid don't tell you what you're doing out there. So glad to hear that. This is the black maple saga that we have been going along, and I still have probably 150 pounds of it. So I'm happy to report that this is just a 4-inch piece that I turned and made a box out of, and then getting it to coat is a challenge on occasion. So you end up sanding it, and then like 240 is plenty fine grit to use with the epoxy, and it's mounted again on a 10 RPM motor with a 7/8 inch dowel screwed onto the bolt that turns the whole affair, and it takes 6 hours of rotation, and then you just let it set overnight, and you don't polish it, you don't do anything to it. If you've had a good clean brush, all's well. And so that's the story. Build your own. Buy a little $15 electric timer from Amazon that's got 15 minutes, hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, and you just plug it in and plug whatever you want to rotate in it. If you use other things in the shop around that you want to run for a while, this is really nice. $15. Oh, it's like Christmas light.
All right. Well, thank you everybody that brought in the show and tell items. It's always fun to see the variety that we get there. Looks like we're at the end of our meeting tonight. I appreciate everybody's attendance. If you would like to help get the chairs put up, we'd appreciate that. And then I think there's some equipment that we get out on the floor. So any help is appreciated, but really appreciate you just coming to the meeting. So hope to see you next month, and keep turning. Thank you. Oh, I did mean to say hi to my Zoom people, but I kind of missed out on that.